Are we alive? And welcome back, everybody, to Lunch and Learn. Goodness me, what a long time it has been. But it's wonderful to see you all in person, to see you on Zoom, tuning in on Facebook and on YouTube. And let's get ourselves underway. We're slightly late. We apologize. The technology was a little rusty. But here we go. So we always talk about the Parasha before we start. So Parashat Kedoshim, which normally is latched on to the previous week, Achrei Mot, but it wasn't this year. So Parashat Kedoshim is a very interesting Parasha. It is the densest Parasha in terms of number of verses to the number of mitzvot. The ratio is extremely dense. There's a lot of mitzvot that are mentioned. And primarily, Kedoshim, which means holiness, is therefore talking a lot to do with what it means to be holy in Judaism. So primarily, the holiness manifests itself in three key areas: holiness in time, holiness in space, and holiness of people. And so that kind of summarizes the parasha. People, holiness of people. So, for example, holiness of space. We have one day of the week which is holier than all of the others. It's set apart. Holiness of space. There's a country that for us is set apart from all others. It's on a different level. There's a city which is set apart, which is more holy than the rest of the country, and there's a part of the city which is holier than the rest of the city, which is holier than the rest of the. So that would be an example of holiness in space, not up there, but anyway. And holiness of people. We have the Jewish people who are considered to be holier than the rest of the world. We have the ability to keep ourselves holy and to set ourselves apart from people who are less focused on those pursuits. And so that would be an example of holiness through people. And that's basically what holiness is. Holiness is things which are set aside for development, for connection, for relationship, for defining, refining, and enhancing how we lead our lives. That's when a husband and a wife stand under a chuppah, they undergo a ceremony called kiddushin. It's where you are setting each other aside as the one singular person that you are going to devote yourself to in terms of a close relationship. That's what's being achieved with kiddushin. It's the same kind of idea. The setting aside of different things. It's interesting because holiness doesn't mean that we have to lock ourselves away somewhere or sit on a mountain cross-legged and meditate and abstain from worldly pleasures. There's ways to achieve holiness by engaging and integrating with physical pleasures and with the world around us. So it's about how we use it rather than, or how we do things rather than what we do, if that makes sense. So that's primarily what the parasha deals with. So it covers a few different areas, a few different topics, but that's the main kind of common thread. We also have halachot, Jewish laws, in this week's parasha that talk about the gifts a landowner must leave for a poor person when they are harvesting. We talk about good, general, honest business conduct. We talk about the prohibitions of spreading gossip, of forbidden mixtures like shutners, which is the forbidden mixture of wool and linen that you're not supposed to wear in an item of clothing. We mentioned kashrut a little bit. So those are all the kinds of things that come up in this week's parasha. It's not a story. It's not a narrative this week. It's a collection, a compendium of several different laws of several different areas.
But what is that to do with holiness? That the holiness and the mitzvahs is not connected? I don't know.
You'd think it's not connected, but it is. It is connected.
You know, one of the you get holy. Is that what you mean?
Essentially, that's it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey.
But if you keep yourself apart, although mentally you might be apart, but if you physically keep yourself apart from others that are not on the level, you won't be able to teach them anything or influence them.
That I'm saying it's not abstention. It's not sitting on a mountain somewhere. But when we engage with the world and when we do the things that we do those things within certain perimeters, confines, and in a particular way.
The more mitzvot you do, the holier you are. I know.
Pretty much. I mean, there's bound to be a pretty good causal link between the two. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be kind of like you've reached the destination. You are now holy.
Never reach it.
You never exactly. It's an onward thing, and you can demonstrate acts of holiness at any time in any area. So it's a journey through these things, and it's about the opportunities we seize. So somebody who seizes more opportunities more frequently, right, will lead a holier life, I guess, than someone who engages with the opportunities less frequently. I think that makes sense.
Chesed. If you have a good heart and you do kind things, you help people, that's all you can do.
Yeah. For someone who does that every single day from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep is going to be a better Baal Chesed, a better Chesed oriented person than someone who just squeezes in 5 minutes on a Wednesday morning or whatever.
Isn't this week?
And that doesn't delegitimize what they do for 5 minutes on a Wednesday morning, but one can't. I guess if you think about it like this, because I hate the idea of accolades and rewards, but let's say somebody who devotes their life to charity work or whatever gets rewarded with an award at the end of it, their lifetime achievement award, and then you got the guy who's like, but I gave £1 every single month to that guy outside Tesco. Where is my reward? So obviously it's worthwhile to give £1 to the guy outside Tesco whenever you're there. But clearly someone that engages with these things more regularly is going to be in a different league. But that doesn't delegitimize what they do. Just me. Anyway.
Don't we have to be extra kind this week? I mean, Kabbalistically.
No, in fact, the opposite. You have to be extra unkind. No, go on.
No, isn't it on the Kabbalistic tree? Now, on the counting of the Omer,
yes.
The 16th day, which was Sunday, then you have to concentrate specifically on Chesed. And I don't know if that lasts a week. I'm not sure if that's the week that you have to concentrate on Chesed. You have to be extra. It's a special week to extra aware of doing kind things.
It's areas which I've got semblances of familiarity with, but don't actually know enough about. Let's focus for 3.5 seconds on what Joe is talking about. So the Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot. We know that bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know from bigger picture on Parasha, or whatever it was, Lech Lecha, that there are different Sfirot. There are different ways in which the Almighty connects with the world, different character traits that we can then work on. So there's Chesed, there's Gevurah, there's Tiferet, and they all mean different things. Chesed is the going beyond our boundaries. We've talked about this in the bigger picture. It's Chesed typically you would associate with giving and benevolence and kindness and all these kinds of things. So spiritually, Kabbalistically, areas of which I have such little knowledge and expertise, but you've lured us into the trap. So there are 7 weeks in the Omer period between Pesach and Shavuot, and there are 7 days in each of those weeks. So each week is associated with one of these midot: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Malchut, and Yesod. Not necessarily in that order. And each day is therefore broken down to Chesed, Gevurah. So the first day of the Omer would be Chesed and Chesed, right? So the whole first week is Chesed, and then each day it changes. So Chesed and Chesed, Chesed and Gevurah, Chesed and Tiferet, Chesed, right? And then the second week will be the week of Gevurah, Gevurah with Chesed, Gevurah with Gevurah, Gevurah with Tiferet, Gevurah with Netzach. Okay, so what that means is that each of those permutations can generate something to work on, some area of character growth that you can work on each day that taps into your overarching approach to Chesed and your underarching approach to Chesed and Gevurah and all these different things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant. What day is it today? I don't know. What should I be working on today? I don't know. Probably patience.
Sunday, I think, was the message. So from Sunday to Sunday. So this week we have to be extra kind and thoughtful.
But this week's already the 3rd week, so we need to be extra Tiferety.
Yeah, Tiferety.
You've missed your chance to be kind, Jack. You have to wait till next year.
Last Sunday, I think we were told.
Ah.
I don't know, but Tiferety. Yeah.
For more information on this juicy topic, sign up for our partnered learning program. Get yourself a one-to-one tutor with Jo, and she'll life coach.
I've been doing it for about 50 years, and believe me,
You're the life coach for the Omer. Yeah.
Just remember the Becca Smart Shore. They have a counter on the wall the days of the Omer. Is that a safari thing? Is it appropriate to have?
I think no one has ever donated one. That's why we don't have one here in Bushy. You know, in the rabbi's house, he's got that enormous Sfirat HaOmer belt. Yeah, that was. I brought that over for him from Israel because my parents got asked if whatever. So I went to collect this thing, and I told my mum what I'd picked up, and she goes, "No, it wasn't supposed to be a big thing. It was supposed to be a small thing." It turns out that they ordered them this gift, which was supposed to be probably like A4 size or A3 size, and you've seen it now. It's like the size of their whole wall, but it wasn't supposed to be that big. Maybe.
Wow.
No, for Rabbi Feldman.
Rabbi Feldman. It was a leaving present from Belmont for him.
But it was supposed to be like this nice, small, decorative Omer accounting thing, and it was like, anyway.
With regards to what we're talking about, the Parasha,
yes,
the mitzvot that are mentioned, is there any correlation between them and what we know as the Ten Commandments? Because some of them are in the Ten Commandments, some of them are not. Another mention. Why do they mention some and not others?
The 10 Commandments really are 10 overarching. I've used that word twice now. Overarching. Paul, word of the day. Note it down. Overarching. 10 Commandments are really the overall headings with all of the 613 mitzvot can actually fit into those categories. If you think about it, we call it the 10 Commandments. There's actually more. There's 14 commandments in the 10 Commandments. But there are 10 statements, which is why in Hebrew it's called the Aseret Hadibrot, the 10 sayings. Because actually, when you read through and write a list of all the times that you see a commandment, you'll end up with a list of 14.
So by which are the other 4 then?
It's the way in which they're written. So if you read through it, you'll see that if you want to call it anything that's phrased as a command, like you should do this, you should do that, there's actually 14 of them. If you read through the text. So we call it the 10 Commandments, but in Hebrew we call it the Aseret Hadibrot, because they are 10 statements. They encapsulate 10 ideas. But yeah, for the what would you call it? For the Lynn Truss fans, I guess there's 14. The eats, shoots and leaves
Eats, shoots,
crowd.
Yeah.
The grammar police.
Grammar.
There are 14. Anyway,
There we are.
let's crack on with Pirkei Avot then.
Where are we?
Which page? Who cares? We're still going through that really long
I
list,
know that
Rita.
563 is near it. I don't know how far.
You never finished it, did you?
Still haven't finished it. We've got a few more weeks of this.
We've got chapter 6. From somewhere around 565 it is, I'm not sure exactly where. And the green
is
scissor,
somewhere
yeah.
in here.
I opened on 566, but I don't know what I'm.
Yeah, it's about there we were.
I'm going to go with 569.
Okay, we've got that one. 9.
And I'm going to go with, I think we got up to here. Who loves God. So we talked about a whole bunch of other things over 5-6 weeks ago. Being happy with your lot, limitation on speech, not taking credit for yourself, being beloved. And if you remember, we spent a long time talking about a special rabbi that had died at the time who was very beloved, even though
What number of the thing?
in the English, we're 4 lines down there in the middle. Being loved and then loving God is the next one. Yeah. So in Hebrew, it's called Ohev et Hamakom, loving the place. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure why Pirkei Avot chooses to refer to Hashem as Hamakom in this instance. When we give somebody a prayer of consolation at a funeral or a shiva, and we say Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ar Avei Leitzion V'Yerushalayim. We say, may the Almighty comfort you amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We're familiar, I assume, with what I'm talking about. So Hamakom is one of the names referring to Hashem. Hamakom means the place. So it refers to his omnipresence. He is everywhere. Why the Mishnah specifically decided to refer to him as Hamakom is a great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer. But what are some of the things that we can understand from this phrase? So remember, we're talking about the 48 ways in which we are developing ourselves to receive and to digest and to absorb the Torah and what the Torah expects of us. So we see that there's actually a few different things that we have to love. There's Ohev et Hamakom, which is loving the Almighty, loving Hashem. There's Ohev et Habriot, loving one's fellow creations. Briot, by the way, doesn't necessarily have to be limited to people. It can refer to any created species, any created creature. Ohev et Hatzadakot, to love righteousness. Ohev et Hamesharim, to love Mesharim, which translates on the screen as. Oh, that's interesting. You've got who loves righteous ways, who loves reproof, which I would have put as the next one, and who loves uprightness, which I would have put as Mesharim. So I'm not sure why that is. That's Me'ah She'arim, which means 100 gates. Mesharim is from the word Yashar, for straightness. Pardon me?
We sing that on Shabbos morning, haven't we?
Yes.
Right.
But that's not Me'ah Sharim. That's 100 gates. Me'ah Sha'arim. So no, that's
a difference.
But we all call it Mesharim. Mesharim. Oh, I heard a great joke about that, but I'll save that for another time. Depends how everyone's Hebrew is. So you've got loving his creatures, you've got loving righteous ways, you've got Ohevet Hamesharim, loving justice or loving uprightness. Ohevet Hatochachot, to love reproof, to love criticism. So these are interesting things that we have to love. So
I think that's a weird one.
to love reproof.
Well, yes, it says justice. Well, in the English.
Yeah.
Which is, yes, I can get that.
And
And admonishment, which is sort of a bit like punishment.
Yes, well,
A bit
nobody's
like it, but not.
well, you're
Yeah.
just told about.
But it doesn't have the opposite of punishment. So justice is there, and then you either have admonishment, punishment, or, I don't know, if you're not guilty, then you have the opposite of admonishment. But that,
So admonishment, I think, means when you admonish someone, you tell them off.
Yeah.
Which I think a punishment is slightly different. You can tell someone, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, Gary. That's admonishment. Punishment is, right, Gary, no tea for you for a week. But nonetheless, I think it's still a hard one for us to hear with our modern, enlightened 2022 lenses, to be taught that we should love and enjoy or relish in being criticized, because
That's the only way you
the
learn.
impression that I get from society is we don't love it. We
No,
don't love being
it.
criticized.
But in the long run, when you make a mistake or do something wrong, you learn much more from that than
Absolutely.
when everything's going right. You remember that for next time.
That's what they say with the children, they have to learn from their own
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah.
So that's
You learn
very
by
much.
doing. That's the best way to learn by doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's very much more where that's coming from. Is
So
that
that's the
if
love
we're
of it.
understanding that we want to grow and that we don't know everything, so yeah, to be willing to take it on the chin and to take a criticism from somebody is a lofty place to be, especially in this day and age where we don't like to take criticism from anybody.
Well, no one does. It's your ego.
Right, but that's why to get to a point in your life where you love it, or where you treasure it, where you appreciate that this is what's going to help you improve. I think that's why it's an important one to have on the list. It's also interesting because a lot of people, if they get criticized by someone, they might turn around and be like, who are you to give me criticism? Right. So there's another layer to this as well, which is that there should be an appreciation that the situations that we encounter in our lives, the people that say that thing at the wrong time, and it's the wrong person, it's in some ways, philosophically, it's a message that's being given to us by Hashem. It just happens to be coming through a particular messenger which you weren't expecting. So, I think the best example for this is like when your kids point out your flaws and you're like, who are you to criticize? I criticize you, not the other way around. Let's get this relationship right, But on the other hand, they see you, they see right through you. So if they say something, you're receiving a message loud and clear. It's just happened to have come from a messenger that you didn't think should be the one to deliver it. So I guess philosophically what's going on is that you're receiving a message from the Almighty that this is an area that you should be improving, putting some concentration into. But he sends those messages through messengers that we don't always expect or don't always appreciate. The common metaphor that I hear for this is if a person was to hit a dog with a stick, the dog goes for the stick, not for the person who hit the stick. Right? So when you get, and that's why you get that phrase, don't shoot the messenger, right? Because the messenger is just carrying out something on behalf of the of Hashem, essentially, whether they know it or not. So sometimes this is also, I think, a message for us to know where to direct our attention when those messages come in. For like, who are you to tell me that? Well, apparently they were the perfect person to tell you that, otherwise they wouldn't have told you that. So yeah.
Yeah, it depends how the criticism is given. I mean, if it
Does it though, Peter? That's
if it's
interesting.
given in a friendly way, you can accept it. If it's really given in a harsh way, it's more difficult.
So that's interesting, because either way you've received that message. Either way, that's still being said to you. And it could be that the stuff that hits us the hardest is actually the stuff that we really needed to hear. And just because it was said in an impolite way, or just because it was said by the wrong person, or whatever it is, it still got said. It's still out there for us to either absorb or to ignore. And that I think is what we mean when we say ohevet hatochachot, is that okay, I'm gonna accept that message has been sent in my direction, even if I didn't like the way it was said, or even though I didn't like the way it came, or even though I didn't. I think that's exactly where it's that's exactly the point that the Mishnah is trying to make. Yeah, Gary.
I'm thinking of 2 points of different angles. One is the difference between criticism and admonishment. It seems to me that admonishment is usually done with care and love, and you want to help improve the person. That's one thing. The other thing is how you receive it. Surely it's the way you receive it. If you jump up and say, "How dare you do that?" That's one way of looking at it. Another is to say, "Thank you. I'll take that on board. I'll think about it." And presumably, we're supposed to be the people that say, "Thank you. I'll think about it."
Supposed to try and be the bigger person in these
Depends
situations.
what God said, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what the boy is.
Yeah.
It depends what God said.
Yeah, try it out. You know,
One thing, it depends
go to the daughter-in-law and offer that constructive piece of criticism, and then say, "I am just the Almighty's messenger. He obviously wanted you to hear this, otherwise I wouldn't have said it. But can you please go and clean your daughter's nose?"
It's like that song, Two Lovely Black Eyes, only for telling a man he was wrong.
What a surprise.
I think that actually, if it comes from somewhere that you don't expect or you don't consider the right person to give it, has more impact. Because if it's from a teacher or someone you expect, oh yeah, and off. But the other way, you actually have to think, whoa. So it goes in much deeper.
Yeah. I mean, I find when the kids point stuff out to me, it's just like, ooh, right there, right in the heart, right in the kishkas. That's that one hurt.
Have the same effect on me.
Mother did. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, the daughters, when they're grown up, they always tell you, Mum, what did you do that for? And they think, oh, and what are you wearing that for? You're not going out in that one.
I'll tell you what to wear, thank you. You don't tell me. But no, Gary was actually drawing on something else a little bit, because the Hebrew word there, tochachot, the Hebrew word tochacha, there is a mitzvah in the Torah, hocheach tochiach. When you see someone doing something wrong, the Torah says, hocheach tochiach. You should surely rebuke them. You should surely point it out. You should surely correct them. Right? It's a mitzvah. Whenever we see someone doing something wrong, we should be calling it out. But that's why for every mitzvah in the written Torah, we have to have an oral law to accompany it as well, because the oral law kind of tempers that a little bit. It's like, that's only when they're willing to listen, and that's only when you are the type of person who could give that criticism, and that's only when, and it's only when, and it's only when. So in an ideal world, as soon as someone was doing something wrong, anybody should be able to dive in and say, but actually when you...
It's only today with party days and all that.
Yeah.
Here we go.
There you go.
Nobody,
Yeah, they should give you a news channel reader. So in an ideal world, anybody should be able to criticize anybody, and we should all take it on board, because these are all things that are going to help us grow and correct ourselves and improve and be better. Of course, life is a bit more nuanced than that, and that's why, as with everything else in Pirkei Avot, there has to be a balance, and there has to be a thought process that goes into these things. But that's broadly where we are. Paul, you've been awfully quiet there. Not wanting to criticize, but you've been awfully quiet.
I was a bit uncomfortable with this because to criticize implies that the person who's being the critic, by definition, already knows better what should have happened, which is why they're criticizing. But I'm not sure that that works here. If you think it through, on that basis, we should all do we should do much more criticism in our everyday lives, because that's going to be helpful if we turn it around. The more we criticize, the more we're helping other people. But I don't think that one works.
I don't think that's what it's saying, though. I don't think it's telling us that we should love to criticize other people, and the minute we see our kids or our grandkids doing something wrong, we should jump in there. As I said, there's still a need to stay in your lane, and to know your place, and to know when the right time to speak up and the right time to say something is. But it was more coming from the approach of to receive criticism, even when it comes from the wrong place. If you've received that message, then it's a lofty level to be able to look at that situation and say, I wasn't happy with how that was delivered, but the fact that it struck a chord with me means that it is, if I'm intellectually honest, and I'm mature and I'm vulnerable, I will understand that the things that hurt are actually the things that resonate the strongest, and therefore it is a work in progress to reach a point where you can be open enough to say, I didn't like how that was delivered, but they did make a good point.
It may be just the translation issue.
Yes, I as is often the case, the translation doesn't always do us meisharim. No, okay, doesn't always do us justice. Even though meisharim could be uprightness. Yes.
I think if it's delivered with malice, it's different from trying to educate somebody that they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
So it's a completely different thing. How do you cope with that?
Yeah.
Is this maybe done for rabbis? That you educating me, or you stand there in front giving me a sermon and telling me everything? So you are, well, you don't probably know what I'm doing wrong, but I will take it.
I have a list over here, Rita, actually. Sorry.
No,
Don't interrupt, Nick. No, you tell me what to do.
No, but I'm saying, is this mainly what they're saying here for in view of a rabbi?
I don't see why. I think it's a lofty societal goal for people to be open to being corrected and steered in the right direction. And the fact that as a society we don't do that, right? If we reflect on that ourselves and we come to the conclusion that, like, yeah, actually the ethics of that particular point in Pirkei Avot resonates with me better than the approach that I see the world taking, which is just like, each to their own, no one can do any wrong, do no harm, as long as you're not hurting me, that's fine. But on the other hand, people can get into patterns of behavior that are not good for them just because they're not impacting on others. But nobody's open to hearing anything. Nobody's open to criticize. I can't tell you something that you're doing, or you can't tell. Who are you to tell me? Who do you think you are? But as a society, I don't think we really absorb criticism that well.
I do agree with that. You can't say to a parent, your child is naughty.
Right.
Talking as though Leah is naughty.
And that doesn't mean now that we're saying that you should be able to tell the parent that their child is naughty, but it's the fact that within our own worlds, within our own spaces, when criticism comes our way, there's two ways that you can deal with it. Either you can take it on the chin and say, that has actually struck a chord with me. And if I think long and hard about it, that is something that I do, which probably isn't so good. And if I chose to, I could refine that part of my character and do things a little bit better. Or I can say, completely dismiss it because I don't want to be told about things that I'm doing wrong, because I am fine as I take me or leave me. This is how I am. I can't change, like it or lump it. And life is about striking that balance between those two extremes. Like it or lump it, take me as I am, or I'm gonna be receptive.
Well, I think we all must at some point. I've been hurt very much by something and I was very upset for a long time. Then I thought about it and I thought, no, they're right.
Yeah.
You know, and I did try to, and I've been doing something all my life that I thought was so nice, and then I discovered it wasn't.
You know, if I snap at my kid, right, and my kid cries, I'm like, why are you crying? And they say to me, you didn't have to tell me by shouting.
Oh.
Who are you to tell me how I should tell you to? If I think about it, yeah, you're probably right. I probably didn't need to tell you by shouting.
Yeah,
you know, those are the small examples which we can extrapolate into every single situation that we face, where we go, actually, if I think about it, probably overstepped my mark there. I'm sorry. Probably didn't do that in the right way.
They drive you crazy, so you just do stuff.
Listen, every example that I have in my life about my anger comes from my kids. Gary.
So am I right in thinking this Pirkei is to say that it's a virtue to welcome and to love?
Yes, if it's constructive.
Not to deliver admonishment, but
yes.
to receive it.
Yes.
If it's constructive criticism, you should try and accept.
Even if it's destructive, it's been out there. Someone said it, and we either have the option to sweep it under the carpet, or to say, okay, that has been pointed out. It wasn't in a constructive way. They might have been going through their own stuff in their life, and that's why they did it and said it and whatever. But it struck a chord with me because actually, when I think about it, maybe I am a bit like that. Maybe I do that.
I think this one's huge.
Yes, it is. It's a big, very big subject.
You know, quite a lot. You know, we've been studying for quite some time, and you lot have been studying much longer than me. And sometimes it kind of goes a bit over my head, but this one is really resonating. It's good
because it happens in life. People do criticize and they do upset you.
So a lot of these things do come up, but I've got more notes on my screen here for loving reproof than I do for loving the Almighty, ironically. But yeah, if we were to just take those different things that we are supposed to love, it doesn't necessarily fit with things that we would come up with intuitively. I can understand. I mean, fine, loving Hashem, okay, he gives me everything, and I should love him, and all the rest of it. And I know that I've got a mitzvah in the Torah of V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, that I should love Hashem, and when I appreciate everything that He's done for me, then I'll grow to love Him. But I think fundamentally, that word love, the fact that we band it around for so many different things, I love cheesecake, I love music, I love water, I love, all the different things that we say that we love, they don't make this list. I love fish. Well, if you love fish, why do you kill them and eat them? Why don't you put them in a tank and feed them? So there's a need also to understand what that actually means to love something.
It says love admonishment, but it's not saying you have to change your ways. It's just saying you have to accept.
Bring it on, guys. Go on, tell me everything that I'm doing wrong. Go on.
Is that not right? No, it's not saying you have to change. It's just saying you have to accept criticism. And you have to decide whether that criticism is justified or not.
It's a good point. I think instinctively I might have jumped to the conclusion there that you're supposed to use that as your propeller or whatever, your motivation to change. But you're right, it doesn't spell it out for us there.
But this is all about making you a much rounder person.
Yeah.
And a better person. That's what it's.
I find chocolate cake also helps with making me a much rounder person.
But no, that's what it's all about. Making you think and becoming a better person. Learning.
We all try.
Yeah.
We do. I'm very trying, I'm told. People have often criticised me that I'm very trying.
It's good you've got the oral Torah, which explains all this. So it's not like black and white, where it says on there, it elaborates a bit.
Well, we've been discussing this one thing this whole time. So it just shows you how much.
Just shows how traumatized we all are. All right. Well, let's finish off with some of these other ones. You know, loving creatures and loving righteous ways and loving justice. So let's think about loving righteous ways. Ohev et ha. What was it? Sidkot, tzedakot. How does it? Ohev et tzedakot. Yeah. So so loving righteous ways. So one of the things that was pointed out then, if we love an approach to life, a righteous approach to life, if we love that, then anything that you love, anything that you invest in, if you get exposed to something that doesn't go along with that worldview, it will hurt you, it will upset you. So if you lead a life where you are devoted to doing things in the right way, in a just way, you know, meisharim, loving justice, loving being up front and and being an upright person, it should hurt us if we see things in the world that don't do that. So when we see people being oppressed, when we see strife and arguments and you know, all of the different things that we see in the world where things are not fair, where things are not right, where things are not just, that should strike a chord with us if we are leading a life of loving the right way of doing things. So so really, any time that we get upset with the situation in Ukraine, anytime we get upset by seeing family members in an argument, anytime we get upset by you know, any campaign to end oppression or to end whatever it might be, that's all a healthy response to leading a life of loving righteousness, loving righteous ways, loving justice, loving creatures, loving people. That's all the outgrowth of someone who is developed and mature in those particular areas. So I find that encouraging. I find that empowering, because it means that all of the you know, the campaigns that we get behind, all the charities that we try to support, that's all because we are emotionally healthy enough to realize that things are not the way that they should be, and things are not yet righteous, and things are not yet just, and things are not yet upright. And so the more that we develop that, the more heightened our senses become to that, the better it is, really, because then it will hopefully motivate us to try and solve those problems, and to try and you know, spread our influence in those areas, to try and end them. So yeah,
it's compassion. We have to have, you know, compassion for this.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think they're loving God just now in Ukraine, and they marry her.
That's interesting. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it's called Ohevet HaMakom rather than just Ohevet Hashem, right? Because if you understand that God is found in everywhere and everything, you know, in all places, there's a need for us to share those sensitivities. And not just to say like, oh yeah, that's a godless part of the world, yeah, or you know, my father-in-law always used to call Manchester, oh, that God-forsaken place. Right? We used to live up there, and every time he'd come up and goes, what am I doing in this God-forsaken place? You know, but without wanting to criticize my father-in-law, but maybe that's why it refers to it as Hamakom, because actually all places, all people, all areas are deserved of straightness and uprightness and justice and all that. Maybe that's why it's there as Hamakom. Anyway, I'd come for today. Let's leave it there for today. We'll pick it up next week because this one's also probably going to resonate. Mitra. Oh, not next week, in 2 weeks. Mitrachek min hakavod, keeping far from honor.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see how we do with that one, guys. So let's leave it to there today. To all those watching, let's see who's watching. One person on Zoom or YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Come and join us for the after party on Zoom. In the meantime, we wish you a wonderful